Hello, my name is Maria Garrett, under the direction and supervision of Dr. Matthew Croston, the Director and Professor of the Master's Program in International Security and Intelligence Studies at Bellevue University in Bellevue, Nebraska. I would like to talk a little bit about the cooperative relationship and double-ended allegiance between the United States Central Intelligence Agency and Israel's Mossad in dealing with the Iranian conflict. This Iranian conflict can either justifiably dissolve the relationship between the CIA and Mossad or set precedents for an even greater and robust relationship, depending upon the future of foreign policy in dealing with a nuclear Iran. For over 4 decades, the CIA and Israel's Mossad are considered to be deeply ingrained in foreign covert operations, political decision-making, cyber warfare, and strategic intelligence collections. History ignites an extraordinarily intimate and inseparable alliance. Resistance to the current nuclear Iran conflict has brought rise to the notion that their cooperative relationship can quickly become conflicting. Now, it is not unjust or uncommon for a foreign intelligence relationship to have opposing views. The CIA is committed to the U.S. just as Mossad diligently supports Israel. Iran's nuclear production is a heated controversy between the U.S. CIA and Israel's Mossad. The United States stands on the premise to deliver means other than military action to Iran's proliferation of nuclear arms in support of sanctions to promote future peace, dismantle the threat, and sustain oil prices in the region. In opposition, Israel is determined to eliminate the existential threat of their existence by means of direct military or covert action against Iran through the immunity concept of defense. Now, Israel is demographically very small, the size of New Jersey. Only a handful of nuclear weapons could end its existence. In the eyes of Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, a nuclear Iran is a direct existential threat which caters to conditions so perilous it makes a preemptive strike necessary to act as a dilatory strategy. The goal is to eliminate the Tehran facility before it cultivates nuclear capability as a matter of Israel's survival. With both the U.S. and Israel at logical thought propositions a mean to rationalize such indifferent courses of action, neither are collaboratively genuine in sharing a common goal necessary to eliminate the threat and sustain the relationship without inevitable consequences of war or division. The constraints of a nuclear Iran and a cooperative relationship with Israel's Mossad sets great challenges for the U.S. in conflict resolution that will protect and support the entire triangular divide. Despite the surmounting barriers for resolution, there are 5 options placed in the pool of reconcilable courses of action that the U.S. can deliberate. There's military action, sanctions, negotiations, covert intelligence action, and nothing. The first option is military action. Military action will be the greatest severity of the 5 options for the U.S. or Israel in seeking an Iranian resolution. The U.S. military is in a compromising position with this option to invade Iran or to approve of Israel's preemptive strike. Considering the variables of such an outcome are vastly unpredictable, that may warrant long-term negative consequences. Robert Gates, the former CIA director, stated, "Once war is unleashed, it becomes unpredictable. The Iranians could disrupt oil exports from the Persian Gulf, they can increase their aid to insurgencies, and step up terrorist attacks worldwide." The CIA also contends that a long-term strategy with a diplomatic solution is still the best means to resolve this encumbrance between the nations without throwing the U.S. into another Iraq or encouraging a continued rise of terrorism in response to a direct military action. As noted, Israel, on the other hand, is persistent with eliminating the existential threat proposed by a nuclear Iran through a preemptive strike against Iran's facilities. Military action is a dominant criterion in Israel's foreign policy objectives for resolution. Unfortunately for Israel, this resolution accepts very little international support. Iran hides under the security blanket of many oil consumers such as China. There are many countries dependent upon Iran's energy supply that may fuel an even greater discourse for Israel's survivability if the oil supply is interrupted, especially if the U.S. decides not to intervene. While there is no reason that Israel would doubt the U.S. in its firm commitment to guarantee Israeli survival, it can quickly dissolve. Donald Snow, the author of Iran Facing Down Regional Aspirations and Nuclear Weapons, referred to this as Israel's self-fulfilled prophecy as a demographic time bomb. Nonetheless, the U.S. is well aware that 2 nuclear bombs in the hands of longtime rivals, Israel and Iran, is the recipe for a catastrophic disaster or a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, both of which are not an option. The second option is sanctions. The Iran Sanctions Act, the ISA, is the most stringent U.S. sanctions imposed on any country in the world. There are two main goals in sanctioning Iran. One is to deter nuclear proliferation in the Middle East, and to persuade Iran's regime to comply with the UN Security Council's order to suspend nuclear enrichment. The greatest objection is that they don't work. After 30 years, the Iran regime remains inevitably belligerent to suspending nuclear enrichment, and a new list of different types of sanctions has met its end for alternate ideas to oppress or enforce the UN Security Council's orders. The question becomes viewed in a different strategic design. If the two goals were not met, what has evolved from the long-standing process of sanctions applied diligently to the Iranian state? After 3 decades of no U.S. diplomatic relations with Iran since the Iran-Contra, the Obama administration has witnessed an about-face that opened the door to Tehran's decision to enter negotiations on its nuclear program. Negotiations is the third option. Negotiations are a premier venue between the U.S. and Iran in contemplating respectable avenues of approach aside Israel's dilemma. The purpose of joint negotiations is relying on the premise that two parties with equally transparent hostility can sit down and lax the relationship by moving toward a normalcy of mutual interests. However, if future negotiations continue, they must be aimed at a realistic goal to narrow the nuclear ambiguity. The respective request would be to imply behavioral change with tangible benefits, rather than demand a regime change that has plagued the past attempts for compliance. The fourth option is covert intelligence action against Iran. Espionage is considered a tool better succeeded by a sharp scalpel rather than a blow from the brute force of a sledgehammer. This simulates a war veiled under the guise of covert operations opposed to the expense of a protracted war, which can also deliver the same accomplished goal. With respect to covert tactics versus protracted war, it leads to less collateral damage, considering the lethality is indicative to surgical commando operations that prospect precise assassination personnel with impeccable lethal tactics. In addition, it places cyber espionage on the top of the chain for displacing technical presage involved with an initial threat. The US CIA and Israel's Mossad are no strangers to maintaining a concrete cooperative relationship in a covert alliance to disrupt and confine mutual interests. The disbanding of Iran's nuclear enrichment program is one of those mutual interests. A speculation of a shadow war between Israel's Mossad and Iran has already begun, with both parties exchanging suicide bombing and clandestine attacks disrupting part of Eastern Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. In addition, a successful cyber espionage attack against Iran's nuclear facilities gestures that the US CIA involvement aligning with Israel's Mossad is in an underground covert war against Iran. The Stuxnet computer worm, the most intricate and sophisticated design of malware, was unleashed on Iran's nuclear facility in Natanz. Estimates of damage includes up to 30% of centrifuges. This alone set Iran's nuclear program back by several years. Although speculation directs this action from the US CIA and Israel's Mossad, the responsible party still remains unclear. Nevertheless, it is a reasonable approach for a common solution that can reinforce the CIA and Mossad's relationship without the compromise of a political division that is indicative to a protracted war or an escalation of regional chaos. The fifth and final option is the path of inertia, to do nothing. As contemptible as it may be presumed, it remains the metaphorical pathway of least resistance. This is a fundamental law of the universe, to pursue the option with the least effort that generates the greatest success of fundamental interest. Inertia concedes as the best course of action relative to an alternative option that can or will develop less savory subsequent actions. In blatant terms, when doing nothing is better than an alternative option that would generate less attractive actions, then it is better to do nothing. Additionally, when hindsight suggests the same outcome occurs in taking the path of least resistance, it becomes an admirable and just action to take no action at all. As abstract as it may appear, the US and Israel can decide to do nothing and remain in arm's length of Iran. They can continue the status quo with Iran with a hostile and distant isolative relationship, as it has been for several decades, without directly addressing Iran's nuclear enrichment program. The outcome of the other options just might outweigh the subsequent actions, thus become a reasonable reality and justified decision. The underlying question for which course of action is most tactful is determined by the cause and effects to both. the action and the reaction. Either way, there will be consequences to each. They can be positive or negative depending upon which one is taken and the subsequent outcome that precedes the decision in dealing with a nuclear Iran. If war is contemplated, it should be the last resort, second to the path of inertia, by taking the action not to act, as war provides unpredictable outcomes, instability, and the division through basic cause and effect principles. The reasonable assertion to do nothing just might outweigh the subsequent actions from the option of war, thus become a reasonable reality and justified decision. However, a combined strategic option is an ideal and effective way to concert diplomacy. It provides the combinations of sanctions pressure coupled with the establishment of a robust CIA and Mossad covert alliance against Iran. This combined strategic option is destined to produce a framework of Iranian compliance and exalt a peaceful solution in negotiations, while still maintaining the parallel CIA-Mossad relationship, which is conducive to the fluidity of a double-ended allegiance. Nevertheless, the overall commitment between the U.S. and Israel must be balanced prior to making a decision. Though their indifferences may be justified, one must not supersede the other without first deliberating together as a single entity. Additionally, the U.S. CIA and Israel Mossad are paramount in the decision-making process. Sometimes the best option is the one not in the political spotlight. Again, my name is Maria Garrett. Under the direction and supervision of Dr. Matthew Croston, the Director and Professor of the Master's Program in International Security and Intelligence Studies at Bellevue University in Bellevue, Nebraska. Thank you for watching.